So there is, I think, a universal acceptance that sex has to be treated differently in some way. And I think that this also applies to the sex industry.
Hello and welcome to Spectator TV. I'm Michael Simmons, the Spectator's economics editor. Now, for today's show, we're going to talk about our cover story, which is written by Louise Perry, and she talks about OnlyFans, which is this massively successful British tech company, but she thinks it's quite harmful for society. Louise, thank you very much for joining us. Now, you write the cover of this week's magazine, Porn Britannia. I've written a piece as well on the same subject. We both talk about OnlyFans. I go into how much OnlyFans is bringing into the British economy. A few weeks ago, Keir Starmer visited a glass factory in St Helens. And in a whole year, that factory makes less than OnlyFans pays in tax in a single month. Would you not say that OnlyFans is, a British success story and a good thing for our country?
Can I say that it's a success story and it's a bad thing for the country? Well, no, it's clearly good in terms of tax revenue, I suppose. Although, of course, you could say the same thing of all sorts of other pernicious industries, legal ones like gambling or tobacco or whatever, and illegal ones like other types of criminal drugs, which we don't tax. I'm not a libertarian. I'm a paternalist. I'm completely comfortable with the state regulating industries which are bad for people. And I think that there are lots of harms to OnlyFans, social harms, moral harms, and so on. But the thing that I was most interested in for this piece, which I'm interested in general when it comes to new tech, is the extent to which some people are, for whatever psychological reasons, are much more vulnerable to this kind of product in terms of becoming dependent on it, using it really dysfunctionally, basically ruining their lives over it. You could say the same thing of gambling or of smoking, but I think the difference is that while gambling and tobacco are very, very long-standing products, we've got centuries of experience with these things. What's different about OnlyFans and about pornography in general, but I think OnlyFans is this particularly true, is it's almost designed. I don't want to say it is designed because I don't know, but it could have been designed to be really addictive for people who have very poor impulse control and who are particularly easily sucked in by this kind of product. And I say that about the creators and as well as about the users. This has been said before about the users, and this applies to porn addiction in general. But I actually think this is also true about the creators. I think that there's something about OnlyFans that some women find very irresistible in terms of it. I mean, the argument I make in the piece is that it acts as a supernormal stimulus for women who want admiration and who want sexual attention from men and so on, and who will do the most obscene, degrading things in order to get it, as we're seeing with now prominent cultural figures like Bonnie Blue.
And you introduce your piece, explaining who Bonnie Blue is. You touch on Lily Phillips as well. And many of our viewers probably won't know who they are and don't actually know what OnlyFans is. Can we kind of begin with how these particular people, who are the kind of more prominent content creators, as I guess they'd be called on OnlyFans, what they're actually using the app? What do they do with it?
I hope viewers don't know who they are. I don't know if I have as much faith as you do. So OnlyFans functions as a platform for creators to put out content of various kinds. It doesn't have to be sexual, but in practice it is overwhelmingly sexual. So videos, live streams, photos, also more personal stuff like voice notes or messaging, which makes subscribers feel as if they have a personal connection with the creator. That's a way in which it's different from normal porn. So Lily Phillips and Bonnie Blue are both weirdly from the same part of rural Derbyshire. I have no explanation for this. They are Britain's most prominent, certainly most famous, I think, right now, OnlyFans creators, and they've been locked in this competition with one another and with other women too, but the enmity between the two of them is particularly strong as to who can get the most attention, who can do best on OnlyFans, who can get the most attention in the normal media, and so on. And so they've been doing these crazy stunts, which the most famous of which involve having sex with lots of men in one day. So Bonnie Blue had planned this weekend. In fact, I believe it's been cancelled, or she's doing some other stunt instead because the public backlash was so strong, to do what she was calling a petting farm, where she would basically have sex with 2,000 men in public, strange men who hadn't been, I think, vetted at all. I mean, it's so obviously incredibly dangerous, and someone is going to end up dead, frankly, from these kind of stunts. And there has been a case already of an Australian woman who was hospitalised. So I think there's a kind of runaway train effect happening with OnlyFans, which really concerns me.
And these stunts are, they're obviously grim, and what you set out, I think all our viewers would think is kind of horrific. But OnlyFans has something like 300,000 creators on there, and they're not all, behaving in the way that Bonnie Blue and other people you point out explain. If we're not going to ban sex work, isn't there an argument that OnlyFans gives more control to the women because they're not controlled by a pimp, they're controlling their own business, they can decide what content they want to put out? If we're going to have sex work, isn't OnlyFans the safest form of it?
It is safer than other forms of prostitution. Yeah, I mean, this obviously gets back to some much more long-standing arguments about how to regulate the sex industry. And I've for years been completely open about the fact that I favour a much more restrictive model. I think that the so-called Nordic model, which decriminalises the women and criminalises the men when it comes to in-person prostitution, is the model I favour, and that a lot of feminists do, because it reduces harm to the women. OnlyFans is a different case because it's non-contact. It's more like normal pornography, although obviously what's going on with Lily Phillips and Bonnie Blue, where they're inviting their subscribers to come and have sex with them in real life, is different in that sense. It's kind of blurring the boundaries. I mean, I am fine with banning OnlyFans. I appreciate that HMRC would then have a hole to fill in its finances. I mean, that's hardly new, is it?
But you would say we should swallow the cost. This is so bad for society that it doesn't matter that we'll lose, £127 million to the tax man. It's so bad for society, you'd get rid of it.
Yeah, I'm a paternalist. I'm fine with that. Yeah, I also think that like gambling apps are really predatory. I'm not a libertarian. I've never been a libertarian. I'm completely fine with this trade-off. And
then on the women themselves, in your piece, you say that a lot of the work they're doing is grueling and disgusting, painful and dangerous. But you could say that about lots of jobs. And haven't these women decided they want to do this because, they don't want to work in recruitment, or they don't want to work in a call centre? Don't some of them just simply enjoy doing this as work?
So I think that it is universally accepted that there is something different about sex. That sex is an exceptional case. And I think that it is evident from the way that people behave that they don't actually treat sex like working in a call centre or any kind of other kind of social interaction. People are... We recognise that sexual harassment, or this is one of the products of the second wave feminist movement, that sexual harassment is a category in and of itself. We recognise that rape is a more severe form of harm to do to a person than theft or assault. We understand that if a boss asks a sexual favour of their employee, that is different and worse from asking them to do some other kind of task. So there is, I think, a universal acceptance that sex has to be treated differently in some way. And I think that this also applies to the sex industry. I think that if we don't concede that sex deserves a carve out morally, then there are a lot of other very unwelcome conclusions that follow from that. So no, I don't think that we should be comparing these jobs just with any other kind of job. I think it's different.
And on the sort of the two sides of the OnlyFans, transaction, as you point out in your piece, the vast majority, like in all sex work, the vast majority of the OnlyFans performers are women, and the vast majority of the people paying for it are men. But from reading your piece, you seem sort of more critical of the sort of women who might be seeking attention. But are the men not, just as bad for wanting to pay for this product?
Oh, of course they are. I mean, I think everyone involved is incredibly
Yeah.
dysfunctional, but is also behaving not logically, but you can. I think that what we're seeing is sort of extreme manifestations of dysfunctional gendered behavior. So men who are male sexuality is different from female sexuality on average. Obviously, there are exceptions, but men are more visual generally. Men are more interested in having sexual variety, including having lots of different partners. Like, it's not surprising that men are much more drawn to porn, and women don't watch porn nearly as much. Women do consume other types of um, erotic fiction or erotic content, particularly like smutty novels. I'm sure there's a piece to be written about that as well, because that's another very interesting cultural phenomenon. But women aren't interested in porn in that way. So it's not surprising that OnlyFans consumers are overwhelmingly men. What women are more vulnerable to, though, I think, is being drawn to create this stuff. And there's a bit of an Instagram to OnlyFans pipeline, in that if it's become normal among a younger generation of women to put really quite explicit content on Instagram for free, because women do it because they crave positive attention. They want women to say, "You look gorgeous, honey," and they want men to like be attracted to them, right? And OnlyFans is a step on from that because it's monetizing that. And I mean, I estimate in the piece, I'm sure it's not as high as this, but there are something like 280,000 OnlyFans creator accounts based in Britain. Some of those will be inactive, some of those will not be putting out especially explicit content, etc. But that does account for about 4% of women in the 18 to 34-year-old age categories. There's quite a lot of women who are going on OnlyFans. And yes, a lot of them are not going to be doing anything especially consequential. But I think that what we're seeing there is the same kind of dysfunctional desire for validation, the drive towards being beautiful, being very. I mean, the phrase I use in the piece, if I remember correctly, is women want to be beautiful as fiercely and obsessively as men want to get laid. Like, these are the counterpart desires in men and women. And I think what's sort of interesting about OnlyFans, as well as disturbing, is that these two desires play off one another, and this platform allows men and women with disordered desires to find one another, and I think to mutually exploit one another. I mean, I think it's quite a morally complex thing what's going on
So
both sides of the exchange.
do you feel sorry for the men? Do you feel sorry at all for the men that are
Yeah,
paying for this?
yeah, I do. I mean, I think it's such a tragic thing to do, honestly, because I think quite a lot of OnlyFans users probably do have wives or girlfriends. It's not necessarily just, as with prostitution in general, a lot of men who use the sex industry actually have partners. It's not just tragic incels. But still, I think it's a really, I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy.
Yeah. And then just one more point on this sort of the male and female dynamic. In the start of your piece, when you're introducing us to Bonnie Blue, you talk about when she first started doing these stunts, she said that she was essentially looking to sleep with what I think she called barely legal essentially, teenagers or very young men, and that was sort of her gimmick. Maybe I'm wrong, but I can't imagine a sort of man getting away with any kind of comment like that at all now. Do you think there's a double standard where a performer like Bonnie Blue can get away with saying something that if a man, said, people would be saying he was a paedophile?
There is a double standard, but there's double standards when it comes to all sorts of gender behavior, because men and women are different. So it's not. I think that Bonnie Blue is being really creepy and exploitative in doing this barely legal thing. I mean, one of the things that she became famous for originally was going out to Australia and turning up at schoolies events, which is like a post-school graduation party sort of thing, and basically encouraging all the 18-year-old boys to have sex with her on camera. I mean, I think it's appalling. People have double standards, though, when it comes to older men versus older women having sex with 18-year-olds. I don't think we can eradicate that that view. I think we can still condemn Bonnie Blue, though.
Yeah. And then just lastly, a sort of a big question about where this has come from. You talked in this interview about, you know, women's desire to be to have people attracted to them, and men's essentially desire to get laid. Do you think this is purely like part of biological evolution, or has something changed in society, in our environment, that means we seem to be more okay with this stuff as a whole?
Well, we've lifted the moral restrictions which would have prevented people from doing this. So 4% of women wouldn't be going on OnlyFans if OnlyFans were morally condemned in the way it would have been in a previous era. So yeah, some of this is to do with the changing norms that came out of the sexual revolution. I think, though, that it is, you still have to understand it biologically. I think this is built on a sort of biological substrate, but that will be expressed differently. I mean, male and female sexuality are sufficiently innate that in every culture you see it's men who seek out sexual variety, it's women who tend to sell sex, not buy it. You know, you see these consistencies across time and place. What we're seeing right now, though, is those innate differences between the sexes playing out in this, I think, quite dystopian tech landscape, which not only permits but actually encourages some of the worst impulses in both men and women.
Thank you very much, Louise.